since it's time to start, in my opinion, and let's get started. I first of all would also like to welcome you on this webinar of Response Simulator, where we are celebrating today your 1 year of the product, and also like to use this opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what Response Simulator is and what you can achieve with a product like the Response Simulator in your organization. This webinar is hosted today by VSTEP and co-hosted together with me by Ben Borry, also present
Hello,
in this call. Ben is our product manager on Response Simulator, and I am Thije Vos. I am the head of business development for Response Simulator. Let's get started. Make sure I'm in the right window. So, VSTEP is a company based in Rotterdam. We are one of the leaders in maritime and virtual safety simulation solutions. We have around 70 employees working in our headquarters in Rotterdam. We have been established in 2002. We focus on two products. I really shortly touch Nautus. This is our maritime simulator and has also been the base for the Response Simulator product. And this is Response Simulator. This is a screenshot of our virtual training safety solution. And to elaborate a little bit more, what is Response Simulator? Response Simulator is a virtual safety training platform built in collaboration with our experts and security experts we work together with. And what we do is we allow you to place a trainee in a realistic 3D environment. That trainee is able to assess the situation, command a response strategy, and then the instructor can modify the scenario based on the command strategy or the commands executed by the trainee. And then this process repeats until a stable situation has been achieved. During this process, of course, the instructor is fully capable of modifying or making it more challenging or less challenging for the trainee while participating in the simulation. To do this, we use 3 steps with Response Simulator. We allow you to create an environment. We do that with multiple environments, which we're going to show you in a bit, also in a live demo. We have a large library of content that allow you to create a wide variety of situations. Then we allow you to train on it. We do that to put somebody in that scenario, do that locally, so on your computer or networked through multiple computers or on a fixed location or throughout the world. And then we fully record that training. That last stop allows us to also do a debrief on the product. So meaning that you can replay, look back, listen to all the audio communication happened, look back at what happened, and evaluate the progress of your trainee in that scenario. Some of the key learning objectives we are trying to cover with Response Simulator are: we try to build situational awareness, we work on emergency decision making, we try to teach effective use of resources in large-scale incidents, we try to build a common operational picture, work on your command and control coordination in the training, maybe with multiple people in the same training, practice and establish leadership and control over that leadership, and allow you to practice your alternative response strategies on situations. And of course, we can enrich with virtual training your physical training and further advance your responder in their emergency preparedness. How can RS be used? It can be used throughout the complete chain of command. As you see in our little schedule, on the top you see the different roles we identify in this chain of command, going from a crisis center all the way to an operational role. And we allow them to participate in 3 ways: by a camera matrix, or a trainee, or controlling or operating an object or a vehicle. RS is for the advanced user with advanced logics and advanced storytelling, but also for on-the-go teaching by showing into classroom situations simple incidents for that situational awareness. And of course, RS can be used on screen or in a VR setup. Ben, I would like to give the word to you to further elaborate as what happened in the last year on Response Simulator.
Thank you very much, Thije. So, I want to talk a little about where we've come from, but also more about where we're going in the future. So the image you can see here, on the bottom part, you see the same model rendered in Rescue Sim. Now, that's the predecessor to Response Simulator. On the top half of the image, you can see the exact same model, but rendered in Response Simulator. So it gives an impression of the strides we've made with visual realism. This was one of the things we've really been requested by our clients because it really immerses the trainee much more than an image like you see in the bottom, which doesn't look so realistic. Next slide, please. So from 2008, basically VSTEP had two product lines. We had Rescue Sim, which I just mentioned was the predecessor to Response Simulator. It was more constrained, so it was more focused on incident command, whereas Response Simulator is more versatile. And then we had Nautis, which on the next slide, please, you can see a little bit more about. So Nautis is our range of maritime simulators, which cater to everything from naval academies, maritime training schools, inland shipping, etc. Now, this became really relevant for Response Simulator. Next slide, please. Because what we decided to do was completely stop the development of Rescue Sim and use Nautis as a basis. Next slide, please. So what this enabled us to do was to utilize and leverage all of the investment that was put into our Nautis product line, because a lot of the functionalities being developed there were very relevant for RS, but it also gave us a much more modern and versatile development platform to work with. So it enabled a much greater level of visual realism, but also much more flexibility to create complex scenarios, add new functionality, and so on and so forth. But as I mentioned, one of the key benefits of sharing the same development platform is that all of the investments made into Nautis and the same into Response Simulator benefit both products. So they really accelerate the overall development of our products. Next slide, please. So actually, a year to today, we first launched Response Simulator version 1.0. We launched it at the FDIC show over in Indianapolis in the US, the fire show there. And since then, we've followed a very aggressive development strategy. So we've been launching a major new release every 3 months. So these are seasonal releases. You can see, I'm not going to go into too much detail on what we did in the past, but you can see from here that there's significant new features, improvements, and new content. Next slide, please. I will talk a little bit about the red text because this is version 1.4, which will be released in the next few weeks. So what we're doing with this version is we are enabling the first version of CCTV. So basically, this is functionality that allows you to simulate CCTV. You can have multiple camera feeds all going into a single matrix where you can see views from different points of an incident. You can control each camera, rotate it, zoom it, just like you would an actual CCTV system. So this is one of our first major steps, not only in the security sector, but we're seeing this technology used by all sorts of different services around the world. We're also having a completely new debrief system. So this is built up from scratch. And one of the key benefits this brings is voice recording. So previously, you could record a scenario and you could see exactly what was done by your instructor and your trainee. But now we're adding voice. So basically, you can hear the voice of your instructor and your trainee. And this gives a lot more context into the decision-making process. So you can not only see the actions, but you can hear the dialogue which preceded those actions. So it gives you more of a basis to assess the level of competence of your trainees. We're also adding VR support. So now you can use the Oculus VR headsets, both if they're connected to the instructor computer, but also separately. So you can have separate network stations using VR. Driving of emergency vehicles. So it's now possible for your trainee to actually enter a vehicle and drive it somewhere. So this was something which is quite key in some large-scale incidents where you want multiple trainees to basically look at the incident from different vantage points and communicate with each other to form a more cohesive operational picture. So the vehicles really open that up. We have things like auto-aiming, which is something that's been requested a lot. So if you have a vehicle which has a hose and you want to spray the hose on the fire, now you can aim with a single click instead of having to manually change all of the parameters, and much more improvements on the configuration for user controls so that you can quickly go from walking a trainee to driving to operating a CCTV matrix with a control mechanism that makes sense. In addition to this and some various UI improvements, we've added 47 new content items. So that's a mixture of characters, buildings, objects, etc. Next slide, please. So what I want to talk about next is what we're working on over the coming months. So we've got quite a few ambitious developments that we're working on. One of the key areas is wildfire, which is becoming a real problem over the last couple of years, as I'm sure you're all aware. So with wildfire, we're trying to build a system that can really help commanders particularly to train on wildfire and give them a tool set which can really improve their response, because there's very little out there that can actually do this. So what we've done is taken the mathematical model, or one of the key mathematical models, which is used for predicting wildfire spread, and we've used that in our software and then linked it to certain tools. So with these tools, basically you can change things such as the level of humidity, the density of vegetation, the type of vegetation, and also things, of course, like the wind speed and strength. And these will alter the way in which the fire propagates. And then you'll have control over your ground crews, also planes and helicopters that can drop fire retardant and influence the propagation. And then you have an instructor interface on top of the regular interface, which will give you control over commanding fire truck units, planes, helicopters, and of course also radio communication, because this is really key for wildfire, where you have large numbers of people all having to communicate and coordinate. So in terms of the trainees for wildfire, you're able to pilot planes, helicopters, and also drive fire trucks. And of course, control firefighters and truck units that are on the grounds, and communicate between any of these different vehicles or modes. Visualization-wise, it's really important for us to get the fire, smoke, and the embers spot on. So this is something we're working on now. You can see the images on the right. These depict some of our progress. Also burnt trees and trains, so not just the burning, but of course they need to leave behind a trail of burnt trees and burnt terrain, because this is important, particularly from an aerial perspective, to recognize direction and that kind of thing. And then, of course, as you can see in the bottom image, there's the dropping of water or fire retardant, which will influence the spread. So this is something which we've been actively working on with a number of experts in this field, and it's developing quite nicely. You can see the images are from a prototype, and we will start working with the experts on our first prototype within the next few weeks. Thank you very much. Crowd AI. So this is another key area. Going back about 7 years ago, we developed a fairly sophisticated crowd project, and it was used, as you can see in the bottom image there, by the police and also a couple of security companies. What we've done is we're taking all of the code from this and we're putting it into Response Simulator. So ultimately, it gives you a pretty sophisticated crowd system in which you can use, particularly with the CCTV and camera matrix, to have a very good security simulation. So some of the things we're working on here, one of the things is behavior of crowd, which is driven by interests mapped to targets. So what that means is each character will have a particular target that interests them. So for instance, it could be something like taking money from a cash machine, or going towards a particular building or shop and entering it. So by mapping a target to each character, you end up with a very realistic crowd behavior that mimics reality. Another thing we're looking at is basically having characters having the ability to temporarily leave the crowd. So for instance, if they enter a bank, you'd expect them to appear out of the bank a few minutes later and then continue on their journey. So this sort of behavior is also important, particularly for surveillance, where you will lose track of a particular target and then you'll want to resume that after some time. In terms of group behaviors, so crowds forming around incidents, formations of riot police, etc. So this is where you have lines of riot police you may want to form or form a ring around a particular incident, something like that. So this kind of formation will allow the instructor to basically control the incident using those formation ideas. Mixed groups. So here you can have different portions of the crowd having very different behaviors. So you could have, for instance, one scenario which contains violent protesters, peaceful protesters, bystanders, and passers-by. So the idea here is that as someone that's either trying to control the crowds or someone that's using CCTV for surveillance and trying to build a picture of what's happening, it makes it more complex because you have different groups of people behaving in very different ways, and you'll need to gain some understanding of this in order to coordinate your response. For dynamic behavior, so reaction to objects, vehicles. One slide back, please.
Sorry.
No problem. And characters that enter pedestrianised areas. So what this means is that the instructor can place, for instance, a police car driving along a pedestrianised area, and the crowd will automatically take evasive action. You can also do things like placing barriers, blocking pathways, and then the crowd will automatically respond and find alternative routes. So this is something that we're working on now, and we should have the first version of this crowd system available in the next release in the summer in 1.5. Next slide, please. So trainee interaction, this is another key development we're working on. So this is where you basically empower your trainee more. So the trainees will then have access to buttons, levers, dials, etc. And these can directly influence your scenario. So for instance, you could have a particular button or dial, the trainee presses it, and then you'd expect something to happen. Maybe an alarm sounds, maybe water spray starts, or any other kind of action that you want. The idea is that the instructor can script the action based on each button, so it gives a lot of flexibility. Data displays is another key aspect of this. So you can have dials or digital readouts, like you can see in the image here. So when you press a particular button, you'd expect a response from a particular dial. And if that response is not what you expected, then you may need to take a particular action.
Ben, maybe to add to this is that this also will allow us to focus more on the standalone training part of the safety training.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a key aspect that comes into this. So, the more control you give to your trainee, it basically enables you to script scenarios where your instructor is not needed to be present. Just going back to the interpolation there. So the idea is that you can also make values change over a period of time. So this is quite important, where you don't want to have an instantaneous difference, but you want to see something change over a few seconds. But going back to what Taya just mentioned, yeah, it really opens up the door for autonomous training.
All right.
Cloud streaming. So this is probably the most important development we're working on right now. And this is the ability to have the software basically be calculated completely on a server. So the software is running on a server. It sends a video stream back to whatever device you're using. And what this does is drastically reduce the hardware requirements to run RS. So in theory, you could even run it on a tablet or something like that. And this has a number of other key benefits, another one being scalability. So you can upscale and downscale the number of trainees or instructors you need based on your scenario. So whereas at present you have a number of dedicated licenses around what you assume you need, with this kind of situation, you can really upscale and downscale based on what that particular training session needs. And this also gives us a lot of flexibility with licensing. So we can start looking at things like, paying per hour of usage. So you can, again, really upscale and downscale depending on what you need. So hopefully this has given you some insight into what we're working on over the next few releases. And I'm going to hand you back over to Taya now.
All right, thank you very much, Ben. We thought it would be interesting to quickly emphasize on a few user cases. And considering the time, Ben, I think we should go to that live section of the software pretty quickly. But let me elaborate a little bit. I just pointed out 4 of our typical user cases response simulators being used for. So a market that we are pretty active in is in the aviation industry, where they practice all kinds of strategies around aviation-related incidents. Customer we have in that sector is Schiphol, our local airport here in the Netherlands. Another example of where we are working on at this moment is with Lion, and then more Lion, the training facilities they do. So that's focused on combining physical training with virtual training. Prepare your physical training on the simulator, go outside, do your physical training, and continue what you have learned on your virtual training. Another example of one of the users that uses the response simulator software is Chevron, the oil organization from the US. They train their terminal operators, but also their onboard security personnel and safety personnel on how to respond to a wide variety of incidents that could happen on terminals or on ships. These are all typical low frequency but high consequence scenarios. So if something happens, it's really on. And then some interesting to mention is just our normal fire station or our local community fire station that uses Response Simulator to mostly train their incident commanders. So to prepare and train their incident commanders, and even until such a level that they assess the quality of their incident commanders, if they are being ready to be promoted to that next level or to be promoted towards an incident commander. Ben, I think it's time to go to the live demonstration. I'm going to stop my screen share for a second, and I'm going to fire up the software.
Sounds good.
So everybody, will be looking a little bit at me, at Ben, for a second. Ben, maybe we could answer already one of the questions that came in between. Somebody asked, will a trainee interaction include the use of detectors or hazmat incidents? So I think that's towards gas readers and so on.
I mean, certainly this is something we're already catering to, is having this kind of hazmat meter. So at the moment, you can have a concentration radius of a particular hazard, and you've got different types of meters you can use to detect the concentration. So as your trainee holding the meter moves closer towards the radius, the level of increase. So this contains CO. It's also ppm. I think there's four different chemicals that you can detect the concentration of, also radiation. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. A question from Maurice. Which specific mathematical model is the wildfire propagation based on?
That is a good question, and I'll have to get back to you on that one. Our expert who's been researching it will know. I could ask him in the background and see if he can get that info. So I'll ask him that question and see if he responds. Okay.
We will get back to that question, Maurice, I think before the end of the meeting. In the meanwhile, the software has been fired up. I'm going to share my screen again. 1 second. Here we go. Ben, can you confirm if you see the Response Simulator product?
I do see it. That looks fine. Okay, and I've got an answer to the wildfire model already. Okay. It's the Rothermel surface spread. Hopefully that's meaningful, more meaningful for you than me, because
if I remember, it's one of the most commonly used fire spread models in the US as well, Maurice.
Yeah, that was what I'd been told. Great. Okay. We ready?
Yes, we're ready. I'm ready.
Okay, so what you can see here, this is our instructor interface, which is pretty much the same interface whether you're creating a scenario or if you're training. Now, so in the center, of course, we have our 3D view, and this is essentially an orbit camera. So what Tyre can do, you can see, is rotate the camera around, zoom in, zoom out, and also move the camera. So what else you can see here is that at the bottom part of the screen, sorry, I just got a pop-up that blocks my view, is an object library. So this contains all of the content we have in Response Simulator. It's all categorized, and there's also a search you can use to find the particular objects, character, vehicle that you're looking for. So yeah, there's several hundred items in here, all in various different categories. And it's very simple. You just find an item you're looking for, like this car, you click on the screen where you want it to be placed, and then it will just appear there. So once you've placed it in your scene, there's various things you can do. You can select it, you can drag it, move it around. And you can also see, once it's selected, on the right-hand side of the screen are the properties. So whenever something's selected, you see that particular object's properties on the right-hand side. And you can see there's various things we can do for this car, such as opening and closing the doors. These cars have a full interior, which is really useful if you're trying to do extraction, that kind of thing. And we have different types of vehicles here, everything from internal combustion engine, hybrid, electric, because these often have different procedures. So once you have a vehicle in here, because the tyre is just adding in another Prius. I think this is a crashable one. So using this, we can demonstrate the ability to damage a vehicle. So if you want to create a collision incident, again, you can just select the vehicle, change its properties to make it either crashed or intact, and also change the location of damage, that kind of flexibility. But yeah, if we go back to the first Prius, one of the other things that's really nice is it's very easy to animate and move vehicles. So with a single click, you can just select the vehicle, click where you want it to go, and then just press a keyboard shortcut and immediately the vehicle will drive there. Or you can add a complete path in, as Ty is doing now, and that vehicle will follow the path and end up at the desired location. So this same principle is also available for characters. So maybe if you add a character into the scene tyre, you can show how we can do exactly the same thing with a character, but also we can enable a number of different animations. So you can see now we've found a character, added him to the scene, and again, with a couple of clicks, you can animate this character. But you can also very easily just select character and make him run instead of walk. And you can also change the animation. So if we wanted to, we could make this man very angry, for example. And the idea is that we make everything as accessible and fast as possible, because your instructor will never be able to anticipate what your trainee is going to ask for. So the idea is that a lot of the scenario is run by improvisation. So by having the interface as easy to use as possible, firstly, it lowers the technical barrier. So people that are not technical can use the software. But secondly, it really speeds up the way in which you can respond to your trainee's commands. So maybe you can add some effects in, so we can show a little bit about some of the different effects we have. So we have a whole range of different effects here, everything from fire, explosions, drops of water, sparks, and they're all very tunable. So you can see once Tyre selected that fire, you've got various parameters here to change the color of the fire, the size, the color of the smoke, the speed of the smoke, all these kinds of things which can be made very drastic, like you see there, but can also be made to resemble a particular material which is on fire. And what we can also do is, for instance, change the environment property. So if we introduce some wind, you'll see the smoke will be affected by that. And the direction of the smoke will then be affected depending on the direction of the wind. Might be nice to also show the time of day, just to show that there's complete control over this. We've taken this functionality from our nautical simulator, so it's highly realistic. If you have an environment like this one, which is based on a real-world location, the position of the sun, moon, etc., will be exactly correct at any given time and date. So it's also important for, it can be important if you're trying to recreate an incident which already took place. Maybe we can turn on the station and show some of the details we have for some of the interior objects. So one of the other things we can do here is activate objects, and this will enable additional functionality. So this is a basic station, but by activating it, it enables the interior, and then we can go on and turn the lighting on inside it. I think if you select it, Ty, you can click the lighting on option. That also helps. Oh, it already was on.
I made it night.
Yeah, one step ahead on that one.
I will quickly make it normal again.
So this is another area which will be very powerful when we have our crowd system, because you can populate an entire station like this with people. You can set the CCTV cameras at exactly the location they are in reality. and then you can really have a powerful tool for tracking suspects, that kind of thing. Another thing we can do is add in buildings. You can do things that are entirely unrealistic, but we have residential areas, but of course you can just drag a building in the middle of the plane here, and you can turn on the interior, and then you can see you have a completely functional building, an apartment block. Every single room in every floor is operable, including the stairwells, that kind of thing. And you can also change the appearance of it. So you can select it, change the color of the brickwork, etc. And this is quite powerful if you're trying to localize things and make them look like they're from a particular geographic region. We've got the same functionality for the houses, so you can make the houses wood or brick, change the color of and material of the roof tiles, all those sorts of things to, just allow the house to be appear like it's from the region in which the customer is operating. And all of these also have interior. So with Response Simulator, we have a number of different areas you can train on. So this is obviously our city center, but we have everything else from tunnels, highways, trailer parks, warehouse industrial areas, airports, as we see here. And all of these are different layers in this environment. And we also have a couple of other unique environments. This one's fairly flat. We have another one which is more mountainous, which could be quite good for simulating rock slides, avalanches, that kind of thing. But there's a number of different focus areas here, just catering to different kind of incidents you may have to respond to.
Maybe, Ben, cool to show how a full-blown exercise could look.
That sounds good. Yeah, maybe you could fire up one of the exercises we have, and then we'll see how that looks.
Takes a few seconds to fire up. I got the answer from Maurice that the model was clear, Ben. The RotaMel model.
I'm glad to hear it means more to him than me on that one. Yeah, no, our wildfire experts was very quick to respond on that one.
Yeah, so this takes a few seconds to load because it has to load all these all the situation already. Maybe you can tell a little bit about what we see on the left-hand side of my window.
Exactly, yeah. So what we see on the left, this is called the sequencing area. Now, what a sequence is a series of different actions. So ultimately, what you can do is combine a number of individual actions into a single button. So each one of these blue play buttons on the left can contain one or a number of different actions which can be triggered in one go. So the idea is you try to preempt what your trainee is likely going to request. So let's say we see this incident here. We know it's very likely the trainee is going to ask for the traffic to be stopped on the bridge. We know it's likely the trainee is going to ask for the traffic to be stopped on the other side of the highway. And therefore, we can create sequences in here so that the instructor can execute those commands with a single click. So the idea then is that it really takes a lot of burden away from the instructor. When complex things are requested, you can execute them in one go. But of course, you can never cater to everything your trainee is going to respond to. So if the trainee asks for something which isn't in a sequence, you can always improvise by dragging an object in and manipulating on the fly. So how about we run through an incident quickly and show how it works?
Tell them how easy. Yeah. So what we can do is we can right-click on the character we would like to take part in this training. So let's quickly focus on this guy. By right-clicking him, I can say I want to control him. So by that matter, I will give the control to somebody else. In this case, I'm operating everything from my computer at home. So I will just quickly rescale the window.
Scale it down a bit. Yeah, so then we can see. So basically what we're seeing here is the trainee view, which would normally be on a dedicated monitor, completely separate from what you're seeing here. But as we're sharing a single screen, we'll put both together. So your trainee would normally just see the little view on the bottom left here, but on a separate screen.
Yeah, so we'll never see this.
Exactly, yeah. And then your instructor view, of course, is what we've been focusing on over the last few minutes. So in this case here, Ty, you're being both the instructor and the trainee.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is run through this scenario. So Tyre's on scene. He's the incident commander. And so the idea is you first try to build a picture of what's happening, and then you can literally interact with characters on scene to try and get more information and to then try and resolve the scenario. So in this case, Tyre, maybe you can take the role of the trainee and I'll role play the instructor.
Yeah, so I'm the trainee. I arrive on scene, and one of the first things I do, I take out my binoculars to get a better overview of the situation and to get a clearer picture of what's happening. I see some people in the bus. I see some guy next to the bus. I see somebody coughing on the side of the road. I see an LPG tanker, a tanker with a certain liquid in it. So there's already a few decisions I would make straight away. I see traffic on the highway, I see traffic on the bridge. So the first thing I would call out is, hi, this is the incident commander to the command center. Police, can you please shut down the traffic on the bridge and the traffic on the highway?
Yeah, okay, this is command control here. We will shut those down, ETA 7 minutes.
So the next step I would take is I will make a 360 scan, or at least start doing my 360 scan to get a better operational picture. Take out the binoculars again. I now see we're dealing with a fire, and I see somebody waving. What I would try is maybe scream out or reach out to the person that is standing there. Maybe I can get a little bit closer. Sir, who are you?
Yeah, I'm the driver of the LPG truck. I've got LPG on board. I think there's about 500 gallons. I'm not sure if there's a rupture.
Okay, can you please, thanks for your information. Can you please stay on scene and move to a safe location?
Okay, so there's a command given. So now the instructor would click on that character and click on a safe location, and immediately you can see the characters walking over there with a couple of clicks.
And I think what we could say, Ben, so we have still some time for some questions. This process is an ongoing process. So you work together with your instructor towards a stable situation.
Exactly, yeah. And basically the instructor has complete control. So based on the quality of response, the instructor can make the fire get worse or get better dynamically. So that's one of the key premises of Response Simulator is always maintaining control with the instructor. We try to avoid too much automation because the more you automate, the less control your instructor has. And then, you know, the narrative of the scenario takes a direction that you're, less in control of.
All right. Maybe, Ben, it's time to address some of the questions before we keep talking about the live demo.
Sure, that sounds like a good plan.
Let me see. Look at those questions. 1 second. Question from Mr. Kopsa. Do you have an example of an ISPS training with CCTV camera system?
We don't have an example here. So the CCTV is just being enabled in the coming version. So within the next few weeks, we're launching that. We do have a prototype of CCTV available here, and it does work with a proper control system. But I'm not sure we can demonstrate that right now, can we, Tyre?
No, what we could say is that CCTV is being used by our local road authority to train camera operators on incidents happening in tunnels.
Yeah, maybe elaborate on that a little bit. So we have basically the highway agency here. They're using Response Simulator to simulate incidents in tunnels. So they've sent us the actual CAD files for these tunnels so that we've built them extremely accurately. And then they're placing the camera locations at the exact locations they are in the real tunnels. And the idea then is that they can create incidents very quickly because they man these CCTV stations permanently. And the problem is the people that are manning the CCTV stations, nothing happens or very, very rarely happens. So it's difficult for them to act correctly, on an actual incident. So the idea is that they then switch to RS. They see the exact same views they do in reality, but they can simulate an incident.
All right. I hope that answered the question a little bit. The question from Massimo from Italy. Do you have any idea about implementing functions for the social distancing rules that are going to stay in place for a while due to the COVID situation?
Well, I think one of the things RS is very good at is visualizing. So, for instance, what you could very easily do is visualize a scenario which is correct and one which is wrong. So you could have an incident, it could be a train station or even inside an office, where you populate it with a number of characters, and you could, really within a couple of minutes build up a scenario which is completely incorrect, where there's not enough social distancing, and then one which is more correct. And we could also, it's not available now, but we could quite easily add things like masks so that you could also have the correct use of face masks, or even have stations for hand desanitizing, that kind of thing.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Massimo. Question from Robert Johnson. Would it be able to transfer a created scenario from one PC to another, or is everything locked on one PC?
It's very straightforward. So basically, scenarios are just saved in your user data. There's also a button. You can press a single button and it will open up Windows Explorer with that location where it's saved. You can just then copy that to, either a memory stick or a location on your network, paste it in the same place on the other computer. So it's, a minute's work to transfer from one to another.
Okay. A question from Alexandru. Can you share some more information about the user case with Lion? Yes, I can. So the idea is that Lion builds those physical training solutions, those training containers where we can train rollover fires or flashovers or whatever, or these larger scales fire training stations. And the idea we had together with them is making those same modules available in a virtual world, allowing you to prepare that training virtually, go outside, train on the physical prop, and then apply the knowledge you have on, for instance, if you train on a hazmat container, apply that same training as an instance we just looked at now, Ben,
Exactly.
on this burning LPG tanker. I hope that answers your question, Alexandru. Another question from Alexandru. I'm just going down the list in order. Can we customize the characters, vehicles with the ones from different country if the client is interested in customizing them?
Currently, this is something we do internally. It's something which is, for instance, vehicles, it's usually very straightforward. It's just a texture swap. So it's not something that's very expensive. But later, we're going to be introducing functionality where you can load and project your own textures onto objects. So this would really enable this kind of thing, where you basically have a blank vehicle and then you can just take the image of the logo, the emblem or whatever, and you can project it onto the vehicle or onto a uniform and customize it on the fly like that.
Maybe interesting to add, Ben, that pretty much any content is possible with us. We have created complete copies of airports for customers. But we also have created local copies of vehicles or characters or outfits or whatever we can think of.
Yeah, it's quite a core part of what we do. As Taya mentioned, we've done everything from vehicles, petrochemical refineries, oil platforms, ships. So whilst we have a really broad range of content that caters to all of those training needs, we have some clients that have specific incidents they want to simulate on their exact premises or exact vehicle, and in those cases, we can custom make whatever's needed.
Okay. Answer a question from Greg. What are some of the other generic environment that comes with RS?
So we have the one main generic environment, and this contains a lot of different training areas. So the philosophy with this was we felt it was much better to have one large environment rather than lots of specific ones, because often you want to string together an incident which is not just in one location. And if you have a very focused environment, it prohibits this. So with the generic environment, we have everything from highway system, general roads, cities, village, all these sorts of things linked together. So you have transport networks, that are linked in there, railways, etc. But we have two of these at the moment. So we have the one which we just saw, and we have another one which is more mountainous. And so the idea with creating the second one is it just opens up training for things like, mudslides and avalanches, also wildfire to some extent because there's some forested hilly areas. And we have a third environment, which is a specific airport. So those are the key environments that come with the software.
The final question in the chat is from Robert Johnson. How much time does it usually take a user to learn how to use RS and get some basic exercise going?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of usage, it varies a lot, but it's never long. I mean, maybe you can give your impression of this one as well, Tyre. But I mean, from what I've seen, I've had users that could comfortably use the software within 3 hours, and that includes making sequences. Others, it may take, a day and a half. But really, that's the time frame we're looking at, depending on how technical they are, anything from a few hours to a day and a half to be able to operate the software. And then, of course, you become more fluent as you spend more time with it.
Yeah, I must agree on that with you, Ben. It depends a little bit on the feeling somebody has with operating computers. But it's one of our main focuses designing the software is to make it as user-friendly as possible. And to reduce the workload of the instructor. So the amount of time the instructor needs to spend on getting to learn the software, but also the amount of time the instructor needs to spend on operating the software during a training. Exactly. So we're trying to find a balance between letting the software do stuff for you, but also still give you as an instructor the full control of the scenario. Since you are, as an instructor, the expert on what you want to teach and what's your training goal you would want to achieve, and we're just sort of that advanced whiteboard or advanced teaching tool to allow you to achieve that goal.
Yeah.
So a question from Dave Buckland: can characters in crowd hold phones to their ears, or as they thought they are recording an incident?
This is something that we'll be doing. So with the crowd, we're still fairly early on with the prototype, but we're working on the crowd characters at the moment and the animations as well. And so this will be one of the key ones, both recording and holding a phone to your ear. And then other suspicious things like, someone that's seems like they may be skimming a cash machine or trying to steal a bike. So there'll be a series of animations that you can assign to individual characters that are acting suspiciously. Okay.
And maybe to elaborate, we are working with some interesting also museums to establish our knowledge on what are typical behaviors they are trying to identify in the behavioral detection units of those museums. Question from Lee Jackson: with climate change happening, are you planning to have flooding physics?
Flooding, yeah, this is a tricky one. So we already have a flood system, so you can introduce a flood plane. You can bring that up and down to fairly realistically create the impression of a flood, at whatever level you want. In terms of the flowing of water, that's quite a tricky area for real-time 3D. We have that working to some extent in one of the environments. So it really depends on the level of physics you're looking at. So certainly we're going to add the ability to have what appears to be flowing water down a street, that kind of thing. And then that could lead to your floodplain being automatically raised, over a period of time. But it's going to be an approximation because if we start looking at proper fluid dynamics, it gets extremely heavy on the computer. But certainly enough to give the impression of flowing water and a flood.
Or like something like I just created on the screen, Ben.
Yeah, I need to maximize that again. Exactly. Yeah.
Lee says the illusion of physics would be good enough to start with.
Great, that sounds good.
All right. Are there any more questions somebody would like to raise? Then this would be a good moment for that. I think, Ben, otherwise we're coming to an end of this quick webinar. Just waiting for a few seconds if there's more questions.
Wait for a little bit.
Greg asks, can I request custom content, whether there are objects or entire environments?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have requests, everything from a very minor logo change. For instance, a lot of it, we try and find, of course, the most cost efficient way of developing what's needed. So often a customer will pick out a particular vehicle or character and say, hey, look, I just need this, but with a different logo. So that would be an example of a very simple change. And then, much more complex changes, like we made the entire Amsterdam Schiphol airport, including the underground train station, some interior, and anything in between. So it's a core part of what we do is the custom content.
A question from Maurice. Will RS have a similar pricing model? I can answer that question. I think compared to our predecessor Rescue Sim, we have chosen a little bit slightly more aggressive pricing model. Both allowing more to be generated from one license. So we allow you to generate from one license an instructor screen, a trainee screen, and a third observation window for your operator or instructor. And we have lowered the pricing a little bit on our model. Maurice, if you are interested in extra pricings, please feel free to contact us, and I would be more than keen to talk about it with you.
Great.
Question from Robert Johnson. Would I need an active internet connection to run a training?
No, not at all. So you can run the software completely offline or on a closed network. That's how a lot of customers prefer to run their training.
Yeah. We need to come, if we're using an online license key, you need to come online once. If you decide to buy the software with a dongle with us, there's no need to come online at all, only maybe to download the software once, or we can supply that as well on a USB drive. Anne says you can put your questions in the chat and we'll get by one. If you have questions later on, you can always send us an email. And of course, we will come back to all the questions. I got one question from Greg. Is the hardware included in purchasing the license, or is that separate?
Yeah, so on this one, it's optional. So we can provide a turnkey solution where everything's included, or if you already have hardware or prefer to procure your own hardware, that's also fine. We can just supply the software.
Okay. If that's it, Greg says thanks. If that's it, Ben, maybe we could round it off here.
Sounds good. Hopefully that was useful, everyone.
Yeah, I hope the same. Again, if there's any questions, feel free to reach out. We will be sharing the presentation we have done by email to you at the end or tomorrow. Also, if there's any other further questions, our contact details are always below our emails, so feel free to reach out to us. And we can do an in-depth demo for you or continue the conversation as where we stopped today. On behalf of me and Ben and the rest of VSTEP and the rest of the VSTEP team, we wish you a great evening or great day ahead. And we hope you stay safe and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.